Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Career Evangelist podcast. On today's show, we are joined by Louisa Loran, a global executive, advisor, board strategist, and author of Leadership Anatomy in Motion. Louisa has spent over 2 decades advising leadership teams at companies like Google, Musk, and Diageo, helping them navigate complexity and transformation. Today, she's here to show us how professionals can think strategically, stand out at their work, and lead with impact, even if they are not in the C suite. And with that, I'll bring in our guest. Hello, Louisa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
I'm excited to have you, Louisa. So, I just talked about you being an advisor. Can you walk me through that? As an advisor, what do you do?
Of course, very happy to. I have been very privileged to shape my career across very different industries. I spent the first 13 years in the consumer industry at Moet Hennessy and Diageo, understanding consumers and brands and global local markets, all of this like mobilization of brands and demand. And then I moved into an operational world. I joined the shipping giant Maersk at a point in time where there was, let's say, not a lot of appreciation for the value of supply chains and logistics. I came, of course, with a complete culture shock from a consumer world into that, but was able to make relevance of my competencies and played a key role in redefining the strategy and, of course, positioning that company well in a point of time where the world all of a sudden woke up under the pandemic and saw the value of supply chains. After that, I've spent 4 years at Google. I've built global solutions. I've run a global industry, and I have there advised the largest customers on strategic business transformation. So I'm telling you this long answer because you can see how it's very different vantage points, but across them, what I saw was that I have let's say, a capability to see change happening early on, be curious about where the world is moving, quite structurally going after what does it take to achieve that, and especially, probably most importantly, finding the courage within leaders to pursue that. So where I have been responsible throughout my career for my functions, for the change, whatever it may be, actually now where I am outside of these corporate environments, it is the same competences I use to advise businesses, large or small, executive or aspiring leaders, so that they can navigate and thrive in change.
So, thank you, Louisa. I'm glad you mentioned you advise executive and aspiring leaders. So, I'm going to ask what signals tell you that someone is ready for leadership responsibilities?
Well, I think the interesting thing is so often people, they say, I've been in this job for a certain period of time, so I'm ready to move on, which clearly does not have anything to do with that readiness of competency. I think from a let's say functional and skills perspective, I always look at people whether they are, let's say, fulfilling the task they've been given or curious to understand where they can add value. Because if you are ready to take on a broader scope, step up, whatever it may be, you can't just, let's say, get the list and tick the boxes. You need to actually understand where is the business going, where could the business go, and how could your contributions evolve in that context. So it's more about being proactive instead of being reactive. Then, of course, the shift from being an individual contributor into being a leadership capacity, which doesn't necessarily just mean people management. It could also be leading on a broader scale. I think it's very much about the recognition that the most important role one takes on is enabling other people's contribution, enable other people's growth. And that's, of course, a very, very personal differentiation and a personal reflection. So I think it's more a matter of saying what it is not, but then being aware of how your capabilities can ladder up and how you can put yourself as leading from the behind or side, but not always putting yourself first.
No, I like the way you frame that. Put yourself as leading from behind. So, with that, how can someone maybe exert influence or lead even when they are not having that management title? What are some ways they can exert that influence, Louisa?
I think it's the same, let's say, mindset that one needs when you are leading teams. It is really about understanding how can I be of value to you? How can I look at which capabilities you have and maybe put them on a bigger stage or connect them? So let's say you are in charge of a function, you don't have people leadership, but you need people to contribute to your agenda, or you need the function, let's say the product that you represent, to feed into someone else's agenda. It is then your responsibility to understand what are their priorities, what are their concerns, what's their vocabulary, and how do I make myself relevant in that context? Because then you are able to actually articulate that in a way where you lead on behalf of the product, not just on behalf of yourself. I think there is a lot to be learned from leadership without authority that the best executives use today. It's not, I'm telling you to do this because I have the power. It is, I'm actually making it attractive for you to contribute in this way. And those trainings you get brilliantly when you're earlier in your career, before you have that, let's say, responsibility for the team. So train them in everything you do, act like a leader, generate followership, even from the first day at work.
Okay. So you have a book, Leadership Anatomy, and I know you've been talking about strategy, you've been talking about leadership. What makes you passionate, so passionate about talking about leadership? Why is that so important to you, Louisa?
Well, I think it's because I have had, I said, the privilege of seeing so many different businesses, so many different leaders, different contexts, crises, opportunities, recessions, all kinds of things. And when I take a step back, it is not about the investment or the budget availability or the team structure. Actually, I am seeing that there are 4 behaviors that enable people to succeed through these opportunities and thrive in change. And that's really what I wanted to bring out to the market, not just hold it into those executive rooms where I was serving at that point in time, but if we could get everyone mobilized in this way. I'm deliberately talking about these as behaviors because they are things that you can train every single day. You can do it in every decision you make, or you can make it about the big decision in life. So these 4 behaviors, the first one is envisioning ambitiously. I think this is really important because a lot of people, they set their ceiling too low. They say, this is my frame and this is where I stay with it. But if you don't take the first step of saying, how can I actually envision more ambitiously, whether it's on behalf of your initiative, your product, or with your career, saying, what can I dream of becoming? Where can I dream of contributing? Then you are capping your own potential. So envisioning ambitiously is the first behavior.
Okay.
The second behavior is about expanding with curiosity. I think this is an absolutely essential one also when we're talking about career development, because this is where you actually achieve more than what you could achieve on your own. So in today's day and age, of course, that's also about, let's say, including things like AI into your capability set. But it is also about being challenged. It is having people come in and help you reframe your thinking, not just to be, let's say, following whatever everyone else says, but saying, I want to be curious, I want to be open, I want to learn from other people. And through that, I will either expand my perspective or validate my own position. So that expansion is absolutely critical to ensure that you are relevant in the future and to make sure that you are making the right choices. And I think this is an interesting one because especially when you talk to people who have been raised as, let's say, grade A students and always been told they're the best, it is very hard for a lot of people to acknowledge that that it is still critical to listen to those that you may deem not as capable in a certain field, because they are helping you see some of those blind spots that may be around the corner for you.
Yeah.
And then the third behavior is steering decisively. This is where you say, okay, I had the ambition, I'm expanding, I'm building steps towards that great goal, but you at the same time need to prioritize. You need to clearly articulate. You need to show people where you're going so they can help you. You need to make those really tough assessments. So the prioritization and steering decisively is also what I think sometimes gets lost in career development, because people are like, well, I will wait for the organization to move me there. No, this is where you take charge and you position yourself in the right environment. This is not always the easy and soft one, and not the one that's always fun, but this is where you look at the consequences and you take the steps to shape the future you want. And the fourth behavior is embodying with presence.
Okay.
For sure, the one that most people go, what does this have to do with leadership? But it is the one where you meet someone and they have a natural form of leadership. You see someone and you want to follow them. You also know those leaders, senior or non-senior, where they say you should do and you don't want to. You don't have that sense of them actually stepping in to take the responsibility. And this is probably the space where I think one needs to be, let's say, most self-aware, the behavior where one needs to accept that there are certain things you need to unlearn to be able to relearn new things to be relevant in the future. This is also where you're building your career ladder and saying these things were right for my earlier stage, but they're not right for where I need to go next. So this embodying with presence is a very personal thing, but also one where one needs to go out and show who you are so you can show up and demonstrate that next step forward. Okay. So envisioning ambitiously, expanding with curiosity, steering decisively, and embodying with presence. So you can hear how you can do that every day, small things or big things.
I love it. Thank you very much, Louisa, for sharing those with us. I think all these four are critical for people to succeed in their career. But I want to double click on the embodying with presence, because you said this is when someone have that natural ability to lead, someone that people gravitate to, they want to listen to them and follow them. So I'm going to ask you, Louisa, what is it about these people? Is it their talent, natural ability? Is it technical competence? What is it about them that people see that they want to follow? And how can others, can anyone have this ability? Or is it limited to a certain number of people?
I firmly believe that everyone can train this behavior. I think that some people find it more accessible, but that does not mean that it's not available to everyone. There is no doubt that this requires people to be honest with themselves. They need to know what are some of the vulnerabilities that are holding them back from standing forward with presence and conviction. They need to know that actually some of the things that have built their career may be past stories that no longer hold true. This also means that they need to be aware of, when do I step forward, when do I carry the full risk, and when do I actually move back and allow others to take the space. So this is also about being quite agile, because you don't feel the risk, because you are indeed embodying the change yourself. Leaders who don't do this, they take their personal fears and bring it into the business.
Yeah. Okay. So you are a strategic thinker and you are helping people to think strategically about their career. So for people out there that want to move from being like individual contributor to strategic thinker at work, what would you tell them? How can they achieve this goal?
I think it goes a little bit back to where we started. I think if you have a functional capability and you are the expert in that. Your responsibility for the business is to say, how can that capability be relevant in a larger context? It may not be the full capability, because that capability does belong at a certain, let's say, space within the organization, but which transferable skills do you have? How can you connect yourself to a wider agenda? I many times when I worked with organization, worked with an iceberg where it basically on top shows 4%. So 4% is the, let's say, probability of what an executive will know on a certain topic. They know so many different topics. They need to put the context together. So on a certain topic, it's around that level. Okay. On the lowest level, you will find people who know 100% about a certain thing. It's all they do. They know it in and out. You can wake them up in the sleep and they are the experts. And in between, you have two other layers, let's say the management and the exec level. The responsibility sits equally at all layers, because if you have the 100%, it is not for you to go and push that up to the executive. It is to understand what's the context that they operate in and which of your 100% are relevant at the next layer. At the next layer where, let's say, resources are likely to be reallocated, or budgets or interdependencies need to be clear. At the layer after that, that's maybe indeed where you redesign organization. So be aware at the level where you currently sit, how can your capabilities be served at the right level for the right decisions to be made? And it is your responsibility to do that analysis so you can show that you're actually able to do more.
Thank you for explaining that. So maybe let's go back to your book, Anatomy of Leadership. You talked about steering decisively, which is about positioning. What are some tactics or strategies that people can deploy to position themselves for career growth?
So I think the reason I called it Leadership Anatomy in Motion and talked about anatomy is because you can imagine envisioning ambitiously, those are the eyes. That's what you choose to see with. When we talk about expanding, it's the lungs that breathe. When we talk about steering, it's the arms that clearly take some action, and embodying is the spine. The reason I'm saying this is because these are things that every individual does and chooses to prioritize, and how they actually maneuver through life and through business. But it is also about the business. So if you are a business, you also need to envision ambitiously. You also need to expand and collaborate and partner and bring in new competencies. You also need to do your clear prioritization, your clear communication, etc. So everyone is very good at doing this in a work context, or I hope they are, because that's what a lot of people's responsibility are. So I would say, as a individual, take that step out and say, if this was my business project, how would I be steering decisively? How would I not wait for someone to do the budget cut, but take accountability myself of what's the best way I can get an ROI on this, and do the same with yourself. So it's the same skills. And as I said, I find that people neglect it in their personal development, but they can do it in the business work.
Thank you. So it's about being proactive. And I also like what you have with expanding with curiosity. So I'm going to ask, what role does curiosity play also in career advancement?
I think it's huge in everything, and of course also in career advancement. I will say I have never come into a job, gotten the job description, and stayed in that box. I've taken that job description and I have said, I understand this is my responsibility and I will deliver that, and you can count on me delivering that. But I've taken it as a floor. And from that, I have been curious about, how can I actually add more value? How can I contribute further? So I think the whole principle of saying this, you need to choose to expand within it, not just stay where you've been given. Of course, let's say if you work in a production plant and you have a very, very limited there, you don't do that expansion while you are on the shift, but you go away and you think about, how could I actually make the processes better around it, and then you contribute that in a conversation to someone else. So you take the responsibility for leading forward, and that only comes from actually being curious. If you are not curious about what could be, how could it be different, how could it be better, what are others doing, and instead wait for someone to come and point that out to you, you're actually losing the opportunity to shape your own future.
Absolutely. And I like the way you put it, that people need to be curious and think about how they can expand. And there was a time in my career that I block out like 30 minutes every week. I call it my strategy section. And basically what I do is, what else can I do? How can I add value to my business? So I want my listeners to hear directly from you. How
I would say one thing to be aware of, and I've had the privilege the last year, I've been curious about a lot of things, and one of the things was I expanded with some neuroscience studies at MIT, and it confirmed what I had seen in practical reality, how the brain is simply not capable of doing different things. You can't just say to someone, can you please change? But what you can do is either change the context, reframe the situation, reframe the problem or whatever it may be, or you can create new connections between past different experiences. So telling someone just be curious, it doesn't work. But
Yeah.
saying to someone, if you had to do this in half the time, what would you do? Not as a limiting thought, but as just thinking differently. Or if you said, what would you do if you had all the resources in the world? What would you do if you spoke all languages in the world? Just reframing that problem helps people open up, just as it helps open up by putting them in the room with someone that they have very, very different skills from.
Okay. So how can people train themselves so that they think bigger than their job description? Because if we all just go to work, we perform our job description, we are in a way limiting ourselves and we won't be able to expand, to use your word, expand with curiosity. We just check the box and that's it. And we can't grow that way, can we?
No. And I think the point is not saying ignore what you were asked to do.
Absolutely.
It is that's what you deliver as a foundation, and then you grow from there.
Exactly.
And create recommendations on opportunities. I think too many people in their career, they expect the organization to see how to, let's say, alleviate tensions amongst functions. At one point in my career, we worked on generating ideas, and typically it would come in at some level, and then it would be raised up the hierarchy, and then someone would say yes or no. And the same thing would happen elsewhere in the organization in another hierarchy. And then we flipped it and said, actually, let's do it by layers. So it was not about showing up in a certain way for the bosses. It was actually saying that all the people that operate on the same level, let's say everyone who's in touch with a customer, so in sales, in marketing, in customer service, you sit in a room together and you come up with a solution that works across the functions instead of raising it up. So I think some of these tools of just reframing the question also allows capabilities to contribute significantly more than what they do if you keep them in the boxes.
Thank you, Louisa. So I always like to hear some success stories. So you work with leadership, you work with organization to help them with their leadership transformation. Can you please share maybe one story with us about a client of yours that you helped to transform their business?
Well, yes, but I will have to keep it quite anonymous because that's the whole principle of the advisory. It is their story to tell. But one quite recent one is actually one that has a lot of functional expertise, and they are considered the best in the world in their field. But when I came and met this organization, I saw people who knew they were great, but they were not getting the praise and acknowledgement in the day-to-day conversations when they went home, when they talked to friends, etc., because people did simply not understand what they said. We talked a lot about what vocabulary they used and how it had been reinforcing to use that very scientific language that they used, and how actually it was their responsibility to also have the language so the world around them could understand it. So in this instance, the strategy just needed a little bit of tweaking, but by giving them a language, by allowing them to say it's not going to jeopardize any of the quality of the work, you can still tell the story wider. All of a sudden, their reach became significantly bigger. And not only did they, let's say, feel more empowered, but they actually got more contribution in terms of partnerships and demand in the market, simply because they stepped out of their own, may I say, scientific ivory tower. It was kept for good intentions, but the impact on themselves was actually significantly higher than what they had realized at first. As said, the story in terms of the performance numbers is their own to tell, but it's a good story.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Louisa. So as we are wrapping it, the world is changing with AI, and there's hardly any conversation today without this element of AI. So I'm going to ask you, with AI changing industries, changing our career, what skills would you say or recommend that really matters for the future of work?
Mm. Well, I could say, of course, having worked within Google, having developed AI models and using it all the time, I am a strong proponent and feel that there is ample opportunity. I think the skills are twofold. One is the curiosity element: explore, test, learn, bring it in, select, deselect, make sure that you are in the driver's seat of what you use, but don't be afraid to try it. The second one, which is probably the most essential one, is know your own value. This is what will help you also be critical and say, this is not correct. It does not represent me. I'm not going to put this forward. So that essence of saying, what am I good at? What do I bring to this equation is absolutely essential. And I think it is something that if you've grown up, young people who have had the convenience of these large language models making them look in a certain way, they need to be quite firm in saying, what's my contribution in this space? But once they then use the skills complementary, we see talent actually reach much further than ever before. So the curiosity, but for sure also know your own worth and be well anchored in that.
That's awesome. So finally, Louisa, what's the best career advice that you've ever received? Can you share?
Yeah, I was thinking about this ahead of the show, and I have been privileged to work with a lot of great people. I'm not sure it categorizes as advice, but I will share it anyway. It was early on in my career. I was working on an initiative which was, let's say, bigger than what I would normally have been doing at that level. I had been giving the opportunity, people had entrusted themselves in me. And one of the very, very top executives, as we walked out of the room where I had been given this responsibility, shared with me, like, if there is anything you ever need, just reach out to me directly. The reason I'm sharing this is I think there is a perception in people's mind that oh no, I can't. I am wherever I am in my career. But the conversation we had there showed me a couple of things. It showed me there is trust in me. It showed me I have an important contribution. It showed me this individual wanted me to succeed and would be happy to help me succeed. And it also showed, do not let the organization get in the way of this. So that mindset of saying, actually, there are people who need your contribution, who are happy to help you. And it is a bad excuse to come afterwards and say, I couldn't get it into the budget cycle or whatever it was. So it may not have been advice, but it was a moment that for sure, I think many people should relate to and take forward in how they shape their careers.
Thank you very much, Louisa. What you are telling us there is that we shouldn't be afraid to reach out and seek for help, and that we shouldn't feel like we have to run it all alone, all by ourselves, all the time. So, with
Mhm.
that, where can my listeners, where can they find you so that they can connect with you and continue this journey with you, Louisa?
Well, of course, I would welcome everyone leaning into the conversation. As you can hear, I'm one for continuous learning. So the book is available on every normal channel where you purchase your books. It's on Amazon. It's both, let's say, in a hard copy, soft copy, paperback. It is Kindle, audiobook, whatever your flavor is. Louisaloran.com is where I share a lot of my let's say engagements and my executive advisories come through as well. And I would say I spend quite a lot of time contributing to business publications these days, influencing the world in a positive direction. I think we have a lot of tension at current time, but mobilizing humanity towards take agency. I'm glad to be able to do that through a lot of large publications. So go follow me on LinkedIn, and I will be sharing quite a few on those as well.
All right. Thank you very much. We have come to the end of the show. Louisa, please keep influencing the world. We need more leadership stories out there. I appreciate what you are doing in the space. And thank you very much for coming on the show to enrich my listeners. We appreciate you, Louisa.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the show.
All right. So